I think, gang, I'm pretty sure we're live. Hello, welcome everyone. Merry Christmas. It's a little past Christmas, I understand. It's a couple days past Christmas, but this is the first stream since Christmas. I took a little break, took a little holiday, spent some time with my family. It was nice. It was nice. I hope everyone had a wonderful time if you celebrated, and if you don't, I still hope you had a wonderful time anyway, right? Uh, how's everyone doing today? Is anyone even here yet? I know we're a little early. I know I'm off my routine. We only have 2 shows this week. And today's going to be a little bit of a different one. I don't usually do interviews, but this gentleman reached out to me and was wondering if I'd interview him about his book that he's written on Gamergate, and I thought, why not, right? Um, I'm gonna be real with all of you. I don't. I am not a Gamergate expert by any means. I wasn't really in these spaces when that all went down, right? I didn't really kind of mess with the internet in that way. I used it to play games, right? But I wasn't really involved in the social media and anything until very recently. And so I missed all of that. Now, I've heard about it, of course. I kind of know the broad outlines of what occurred. But again, it's not something I was ever uh, really, that I never delved into it, if that makes sense. And so this will be interesting. I'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn something. And today will be a learning day. But he's not coming for a few minutes. So I think 6:30 is when he's going to be here. So until he gets here, until he arrives, I'm just going to share a little bit of what I've been doing recently, my holiday, talk a little bit about the plans for next year, perhaps, and what we got coming up. Sounds good? I hope it does, because that's what we're doing, whether it sounds good or not. Chat's really quiet today. Is just no one here yet? Can anyone hear me? Am I live? Am I here? Give me a second, gang. Let me see if I can't finagle this. Cardis, nice to see you. Welcome. We had a little incident earlier, but maybe I'll talk about that. Maybe I won't. We'll see. Culture Mania, welcome, welcome. How was everyone's? Was your Christmas good? I hope it was. I really do. Well, you're looking at what I got. I got a new shirt. It's nice. It's fresh and fit. Sneed McFeed says, is this guy anti-Gamergate or pro? See, what do you mean by anti-Gamergate? I think that this gentleman is sympathetic. At least from what I understood from conversing with him, he's pretty sympathetic to those who were angry about the reviews and things like that. So, is that anti or pro Gamergate? I'm not even sure how to really define it like that. But it should be interesting, and he'll be here at 6:30. But like I said, until then, we're just gonna kind of hang out. Drexel, nice to see you. No rest for the wicked. Well, that's true. I haven't had a lot of rest today, but I was able to get a lot of rest in on Christmas itself and on Christmas Eve. I was thinking of doing like a Christmas Eve stream or something, but nah, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take this vacation. I'm gonna take this time. I'm gonna just relax, right? I'm just gonna just relax. What was everyone's favorite gift that they got this year? What did Santa bring you? Anything fun? Anything interesting? Was there any particular gift you got someone else that you want to share, that you want to talk about? Love to hear it. Uh, I am a bad gift giver. I'm very bad at it. I always overthink things. I overanalyze things. I worry too much. Um, if you want a good gift from me, you have to tell me specifically what you want. And you have to be very specific, okay? Like if you tell me, oh, just get me a book. What books do you have? What books do you like? Look, just give me a few options. If you want to be surprised, give me 3 options. The rule of 3, right? Give me A, B, and C, and say, give me whichever one of these you'd like. That's what I'll do. One of the if I don't know what someone wants, and for whatever reason I'm socially obligated to give a gift, you're getting a gift card. That's what you're getting, or cash, straight up cash. One of the two. No Cow Mike says, "Gift to the world is WhickTV's gift to the world is returning from holiday break." Well, I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys enjoy it. Did you guys miss me? Did you have fun without me? I don't even know. Maybe no one missed me. Maybe they're like, "Oh, Wick was gone. We didn't even notice." It's very possible. Yeah, let's see. What did you get, No Cow Mike? Anything good? Anything fun? Anything interesting? I got some candy. I got one of these oranges, right? Look, good food makes for a great holiday. I had some roast beef, some mashed potatoes. Oh, it was excellent. No Cow Mike says, was too busy to miss you, but now that I'm back to the regular routine, it's good to have you back. Well, thank you. Thank you. This week and next week, because of the New Year things, it's still going to be a little hit and miss. I am going to stream on New Year's. New Year's Eve is on Sunday, and I don't stream on Sundays anyway, so I don't have to worry about that. But this week we only have 2 shows for you. Tonight's show, and then tomorrow we're going to have on some great guests. We're going to have Josiah on. We're going to have Pisco on. We're going to have Lactoid on, and we're going to be talking about the Trump's being taken off the ballot in Colorado. Michigan Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court of Michigan made a similar, had a similar case go through their system, and they made the opposite ruling. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to discuss, both from a legal aspect as well as just a moral aspect. Artemis Fowl says, what's going on this time? Well, today we're going to interview this an author by the name of Tachyon 𝕵𝖎. Well, that's his screen name, at least. I'm not sure if that's his actual name. But he wrote 2 books on Gamergate. He published one back in 2019, and he recently did another one. So we're going to talk to him about that. Drexel says, you are one of the only mature streamers who has depth. Keep up the good content. Well, thank you. Thank you. I do appreciate that. No Cow Mike says, got a new barbecue as a big gift. Also hoodie, shirts, movies, and some PlayStation credit. Hell yeah, man. What are you going to get with your PlayStation credit? What are you going to buy? What kind of games and stuff? What's new in the drama sphere, gang? I saw clips. I didn't see it yet, but I saw clips of I guess Keffals and Hassan are beefing. I think there's some animosity there. Is that what's going on? I'm going to be real with you. I don't know what the issue is. I don't know why they're fighting. But you know what? Hassan and his community, I'm going to be real. I don't know much about his community. The only exposure I've had to the Hassan's community has been how they treated Ethan Klein from the H3H3 podcast or whatever. And I thought that was abysmal. How they handled, how they just handled him and treated him was just gross. It's disgusting. So if that is anything to go on, look, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm gonna have to go with Keffals on this one, because that's amazingly bad. Or Hassan's community, at least, is amazingly bad. Bad faith, bad actors, and just nasty. But again, my exposure is very, very minimal. I don't know the beef. I don't know the situation. Maybe there's a very good reason that people don't like 𝕘𝖍𝖙s in the Hassan community. I don't know. I haven't seen it. Artemis Fowl says, I am highly skeptical of anyone who wrote books on Gamergate. I guess it's a topic. That's one of the questions I have for him, right? Why are we talking about this still? Isn't it done? Isn't it over with? Wasn't that, at least as I understand it, kind of a wave of issues that kind of all came to the fore all at once? But aren't we done with it now? I don't know. That's one of the things I'm going to ask. Brew Crow says, Gamergate is often seen as the start of the so-called culture war. It's an interesting topic. Well, I can tell you from experience, the culture war has been going on far, far before Gamergate ever was. Now, one could argue that Gamergate brought it into the realm of social media. Fair enough, right? I think that there is a good argument to be made that Gamergate did change the landscape of how we deal with each other and with companies and just in general. That's fair. But no, the culture war has been going on for years. For years. Cardi says Gamergate was interesting to me anyway because it was my first encounter with the woke stuff. I think it was a lot of people's first encounter, I think. Mostly because it all kind of happened in the open, if that makes sense. It was all just laid bare for people to see what was going on. But much in the same way as anything is on social media, while it is out in the open, it's also, what's the word for it? Scattered in bits and pieces here and there, and threads. It's very hard to kind of collate it all and put it all together in a objective kind of timeline of events. Due to the nature of social media and the nature of the engagement with everyone there, it was all colored through personal experiences, personal testimony, and everyone has different ideas of what happened in a real way. And I think that's part of the reason that this gentleman we're going to be talking to today wrote these books, is to kind of collate the information and gather it together. But again, we're going to talk to him in a few minutes here, and we'll find out. Let's see. No Call Mike says, not sure what I want to get. So many games, so little time. Maybe Alan Wake 2. Might hold on to it for a bit. I have some games I need to dig into before adding to the collection, to be honest. Gang, speaking of games, I just finished Rogue Trader. It's a CRPG in the style of, or not the style, but in the setting of Warhammer 40K. Excellent game if you like CRPGs. If you like the Baldur's Gate, Pathfinder kind of games, you'll love it. It's really good. I liked the system. I thought the story was, well, the story was a 40K story. So, I mean, for good and bad, both, it was a 40K story. The characters were interesting. The dialogue was good. There was a few bugs and one kind of really bad difficulty spike. But other than that, I give it a solid B+, gang. A solid B+. So if you're looking to scratch that itch, look, Rogue Trader was fun. It was a good 60 hours of content, about. So worth your time. I forget how much it was, but yeah. Anyway. Let's see. Artemis Fowl says, Gamergate was the first large-scale refusal to allow progs to take over. Progs meaning progressives, I assume? The issue is that gamers did not understand how nepotistic and corrupt the industry was. Well, that's the unfortunate part of life is that most industries have nepotism and corruption within them. Most people favor their family. Is that necessarily bad? Kinda. Firechild, 210 bits. Thank you for the bits. Firechild, how was your Christmas? I hope it was good. I hope it was all you ever wanted and more. Yeah, a little nepotism is okay. The way I think about it is this. If I had kids, and I don't have kids, but if I had kids, would I not want to help them in life, right? Would I not want them to succeed? And if I owned a business, right, and I had a position open, why not let them? Why not let them fill it? Right? What would be necessarily wrong with that? If I owned a store or a business, letting my family member help me run that store and paying them a wage to do so. What's necessarily wrong with that? I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong. Portland is burning 21 months. Happy subiversary, happy subiversary, happy subiversary, happy subiversary, happy subiversary indeed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we are on a hype train, gang. What a great way to start the first stream after Christmas with a hype train, gang. Oh, man, look, I got so much good things for Christmas. Um, I got a uh, new shirt. I got some gloves somewhere. I think I don't know where they are. I got some cash. I got some candy. I got some food. All in all, it was a great Christmas. So, thank you. Thank you. 1,000 bits from Firechild. Look at her go. My Christmas was great. My New Year's, look, my Christmas could be even better though if you continue to stuff my stocking. Christmas may be over, but the spirit of Christmas lives on, and it lives on in your donations to me. I will use them to get things like Rogue Trader, which was a wonderful game. Another game I've been playing a lot of recently, if you want another game recommendation, something a little different, something of a different style, if you will. 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙. It's an auto battler, kind of a tug of war type game. You start by putting down units on the board. They fight, and then you get more points to put more units. And the goal of the game is to kind of counter the enemy's units so that you beat them more than they beat you. And it's simple in concept, but based on positioning and depth and the types of units you choose. You can buy upgrades for the units as well. It's really fun. It's rounds are quick, game's simple, and it's pretty fun. Wick, we are talking about people sleeping with other for. Artemis Fowl says this. Wick, we are talking about people sleeping with other people for good reviews and rewards for game journalists, reviewing the game of their roommates without disclosing the connections. When we see nepotism, we mean the negative kind that comes at the direct expense of consumers, which is why the studios have fallen apart and gone under through sheer incompetence. Fair enough, right? Fair enough. Firechild with the more gift subs. Look at you go. What's gotten into you, Firechild? I appreciate the donations. I do. I really do. Um, Thank you. But I do wonder, like, what's happened that you've decided to be so generous today. Thank you. And gang, because it is that time of the year, on Twitch, if you donate bits, you get a discount. Also, there's apparently a discount on subs of some sort. I'm not sure the details on it, but it does come across my screen now and then that there is some kind of sale of some sort going on. So if you wanna take advantage of that, now is the time. But oh, I don't know what to tell you, gang. Oh, Did anyone travel this year? Anyone fly or take a road trip or anything like that? Oh, the discount ended the 21st. The sub sale is 25% off. Oh, fair enough. I guess my my information was outdated. But thank you anyway for the subs and the bits. It's really appreciated. Artemis Fowl says we know Gamergate was good because lefty activists will never let it go. It was their Waterloo. I don't know about that, Artemis Fowl, but it is what it is, right? I think that it's hard to overstate the impact it has had. I mean, the fact that people are writing books on this and we're still talking about this today does mean it had battle lines were drawn in a lot of ways. Ones that are still being fought today. I mean, enemies, all that came and went. Is what it is. Sorry, my phone, I had to silence it. I had a little buzzy notification thing going on. Brave Beat says Gamergate was proven right. Gamers lost trust in gaming media. Now those sites are going under. Portland is Burning says I still haven't figured out what Gamergate is, and at this point I'm too embarrassed to ask. Look, I was with you. Portland is Burning. I'm still not entirely 100% sure, right, of the details. There's just so much information out there that is, again, if you listen to some, it was a right-wing conspiracy to harass women in the game industry and to drive out the woke or progressives. If you talk again to Artemis Fowl, a much different opinion. Yeah, what Gamergate is depends on who you ask. Brewcrow got it correct. Firechild, a tier 2 YouTube sub as well. Look at you go. Thank you again. Really appreciate the support. And, well, tonight we're going to be asking Tachyon Blue and me. I think that for a lot of, well, we can look at the declining trust in institutions throughout America, right? We have super, like, abysmal rates of trust in academia, in science as an institution, in politics as a whole, right? Congress, Senate, the president, abysmal, right? Underwater. That said, I don't know if Gamergate was a cause of that. I would venture to say no. Sorry. It was simply, I think, the vanguard, if you will, a symptom rather than a cause. Does that make sense? Rabid Wombat says, when gamers lose faith, that's when society crumbles. Maybe. But this happens a lot. People will see a phenomenon or see some sort of behavior that is happening at large with a group of people, and they will say, look at that. That must be what's causing the environment that we're having today. This behavior that is happening must be causing the environment in which we live in. And often, that's simply not the case. In fact, it's the opposite of what's happening. In a lot of cases, what's happening is people are behaving in a certain way because of the environment, right? Because the environment is how it is causing and incentivizing and in some cases pushing people to behave in very specific ways. Firechild gifted 5 WhickTV memberships. Look at you go. Thank you again. Oh, Abaddon got some. Ali got a membership. Artemis Fowl got a membership. Much, I don't know how to say that name. Brian Hernandez got a membership. Look at all of you getting the great great memberships. Jenny Burns says Zoe Quinn's boyfriend was mad that her game got a favorable review, wrote a manifesto that she fucked her way to success, and that was where Gamergate was born. Portland is burning. We are talking about Gamergate today. That is the topic of today. I don't know if you don't want to know what it is. I don't know what to tell you. This is the topic. This is what we're going to be talking about. I mean, look, we can talk about the 𝕾𝖎𝖙 drama if you'd like, but I mean, what's there to talk about? Hassan and Keffals are mad at each other, and they're going at each other, and they're making little videos about to respond to each other. I don't know. A lot of people like the reality TV aspect of the drama and all this. I don't know. I shrug my shoulders. Jenny Burns says, I'm here to make it weird for everyone. True, and we love you for it. But without further ado, the guest of this evening has arrived. So please, sit back, kick your feet up, grab some of your leftover eggnog, right? And get ready to learn, along with me, about Gamergate. Let's bring him on. Hello.
Hey.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. You got a camera for us today?
I do not. Sorry.
Oh, okay. You know what? We will make do. When people watch the stream, they're gonna have to picture someone. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to picture me talking to someone who looks exactly like me. A mirror image, if you will. There will be 2 Wicks in your mind instead of just one. But yeah. Other than that, right? How was your Christmas?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yours?
I can't complain. We had a record low of family infighting, I think. Not to say there wasn't any family infighting, right? But no major blow-ups or anything, so I call that a win. I call that a success.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah.
I think my mom started a new tradition, kind of. She got everybody, including my extended family, Nerf guns. And we all did like a massive Nerf gun battle, which was pretty cool.
You know what? That sounds amazing. I remember when I was in New Jersey, when I was like 20 years old, I was living with some other dudes. There was 4 of us in the apartment, and we got marshmallow guns, and we did something similar and just started shooting marshmallows everywhere. It was pretty fun. It was pretty good. I guess I'll have to ask you this, right? Can you tell people who you are, what your claim to fame is here, and kind of just give us a little bit of an introduction to you, please.
Yeah. So I'm basically just a normal guy, I guess. So I got involved with Gamergate in 2015, early 2015, just because I was concerned about some of the censorship that I'd seen in games. These people, I perceived there to be people calling for censorship of games and trying to pressure artists to change artistic elements of their work. So I got involved with that movement. I supported that for a few years, and then I wrote my first book about it in 2019. Then I kind of disappeared off the internet. That was Gamergate: First Battle of the Culture War by Kevin McDonald. Not really the first battle of the culture war, but one of the first, as you yourself alluded to earlier, one of the first online battles, for sure. First major online battles. So I wrote that book. It was I tried to be. It was more of a pro Gamergate perspective. I did have some anti Gamergate perspectives in it because I did quote a lot of anti Gamergate people and did reach out to them and included some of their viewpoints in the work. But it was more of a pro Gamergate perspective. This was coming right off the heels of the movement, pretty much. Now I'm looking back after disappearing off the internet for several years, and I wanted to write a second book because I wanted to. Oh, go ahead.
No. Finish your statement, and I'll have a question for you.
Yeah, because I wanted to be a streamer because I watched Destiny, and I thought Destiny does like a really good job of talking about politics, and debating people who have like really far right and far right left ideas. And I thought, well, I want to do something similar to that. So I started being a streamer for a while, and when I was on Food
Terrible
Shop's
decision, but
show,
go on. Yeah. Hmm.
Ninetales wanted to debate me on Gamergate.
Oh yeah,
So
Ninetales.
yeah, Ninetales did. So we
Okay.
set up this debate on Gamergate, and it was kind of a shit show. But still, it was kind of fun. So I'm like, you know what? Why don't I do something like real? I could write an encyclopedia about this because I spent like 10. So before this debate, I spent like 10 hours. I hadn't touched the Gamergate stuff in years. It's been over for such a long
Hmm.
time, and it was not fresh in my mind at all. So I did like 10 hours of research
Damn.
for this debate. I created this massive like manifesto with tons of links
For a
in it and
debate with
sources.
Ninetales. Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm like, well, you know what? I did this in 10 hours, this research. Why don't I um, do an encyclopedia? Because like I'm actually like pretty good at researching things, I guess. It turns out, and I could. My first book had over 200 sources in it. Um, so I'm like, I could make an encyclopedia. That way, it's like the definitive work on Gamergate, where it's an encyclopedia of all the major events that happened. And I'm like, so I thought about that for like 2 weeks, and I'm like, no, I don't want to spend 10 years of my life doing something like this. So then I decided I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do a book of interviews. And so I decided I'm going to interview a bunch of people. And that was about 3 months ago I started that project. And I've interviewed over 40 people so far. Many of the interviews are very, very, very long, sometimes over 7 hours um, for an individual interview. And it's been going good. I'm almost done with the interview portion of the second book.
And
It's
this
very
was
I try
and
to.
this was all spawned because of an internet debate you had.
Oh yeah, basically.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I guess to kind of start us off here, right? Uh, First of all, the second book. Do you have a title for it?
I have one in my mind that I really like, but I don't want to put it out there because someone's going to troll and
Oh,
copyright it
okay.
like the moment I say it. It could happen. I don't know if it would happen, but
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, how so you have like 40 interviews. Um, can you tell us about your process here? What what's going in? What's getting cut? How do you decide which of these things makes it into the actual book itself?
well, I actually decided pretty early on that I want to include everything. So it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be. I've started editing the first. By editing, I mean mostly transcribing it and making it more readable for print. So about a third of the way through the first interview, I started that about a week ago. But with Christmas and stuff, I've not been working on it too much. Um, but I want to include everything. So it's going to be all of their answers in full. Minor changes here and there. If they go like and that shows up, you got to take that out. But yeah, basically the full thing is going to be like probably a couple thousand pages long. Which I don't know how I'm
Damn.
going to get this all published. Um,
Yeah, that's a look, I'm gonna be real with you. Like in a traditional publishing format, right? They're going like the editor will make you cut like so much. They want something small and digestible. But again, um if you publish it on like your own site or your own thing, then that's a different story, right?
Yeah, I self-published my first book,
Mm-hmm.
though I think the quality of the work I've done for the second one, I don't know if I want to go the self-publishing route. I'd have to look at like what's all available out there because I don't want to do paperback. I want to do hardcover. Like, do you remember like the Encyclopedia
I
Britannicas?
do.
How they're like 17 volumes?
This is ambitious, my friend.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, I've literally interviewed over 40 people over the course of 3 months.
Yeah. Look, I admire the chutzpah, if you will. But I guess let's start here. Why are we talking about Gamergate right now? It's been years, right?
Because of Ninetales, of course. No, I
Well,
mean,
I mean, just
let me
in
give a real answer. Let me
yeah,
give a
yeah,
real
yeah.
answer. um, well, I was really involved with the movement. I cared about. I knew a lot of people who were involved on both sides, and a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions of what Gamergate was. Um, and I wanted to. I'm like, well, look, this history is going to be lost. Like the truth of what happened during this time period is probably going to be lost. And so I want to catalog and document like what actually happened for history. And I also that sort of became like more of a goal later on in the project, I guess. When I first started, it was less ambitious when I first started. I was like, oh, I'll interview 25 people on both sides, and whatever. And I'll tell their stories, right? That's how I want it to be. I'll tell their stories, and it'll be a chance for them to explain what Gamergate was, and that anyone who wants to find out about it, there's like one definitive work that they can turn to and be like, okay, I got a lot of perspectives here. But as it went on, like two things happened. One, people started reaching out to me, and they're like, oh, I want to be interviewed. So I ended up taking on more people, and then two, I realized that there's opportunities for me to like interview certain people who I hadn't considered in the initial round. And I'm like, well, I should probably take advantage of these opportunities to get somebody like well, I guess I'd have to think of who exactly I added almost everybody after, like half the people I added after the initial wave. But like Bone Golem, for instance, Bone Golem created deepfreeze.it. It's this website that catalogs ethical violations in games journalism, and he did this as a part of Gamergate. And I had the opportunity to interview him. Well, it's like, well, shoot, I'm going to jump on that. He was a major player in the whole affair, so I have to have his perspective in here. And so I rightly, I think, rose to the occasion. And even the anti-Gamergate people say that too. Like Hannah Zamora, she's a YouTuber. She goes by Char42 on YouTube. Hasn't made a lot of recent content though. She was like shocked that I recognized, like, okay, I'm actually finding like the key players and actually interviewing them and giving them a chance to tell their stories.
Is there I guess fish that has gotten away? Is there anyone that you haven't interviewed yet that you think is kind of key to understanding what Gamergate was and how it impacted people and things like that?
Not really. I mean, there are people who've turned me down.
Hmm.
A couple people have turned me down in my requests, like 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙. He wrote some articles about Gamergate for Slate, and his articles were generally considered to be very fair and thorough. He did turn it down, but I don't think any of the people who have turned me down or who I haven't reached out to yet. Well, I haven't reached out to Anita Sarkeesian yet, so I do want to reach out to her. I'm not sure if she's going to do it or not, but I'd like to get her and Jonathan McIntosh on board. But if they don't, I don't feel like anything necessarily. I don't think it's like a diminished work if I don't have them, because I've got so many other anti-Gamergate people who've agreed to participate.
I guess let's just ask this simply. What the hell is Gamergate, right? So I'll give you my thoughts here and my how I kind of understood what Gamergate was. I wasn't really involved in social media during the actual event, if you will. So everything I've learned about Gamergate has come after the fact, secondhand from other sources, right? And so as someone who wasn't involved, just kind of looking from the outside in, it's very, very difficult for me to even understand what the inciting event was, what it actually entailed, and what the impacts were of the events. So I guess that's a lot to ask in a single question. So I guess we'll just start at the very beginning. What is Gamergate and how did it start?
Yeah, so I kind of joked in the past, and I even include this in my first book. If you ask 10 different people, you get 10 different answers. But having asked well over 10 people, I think you get about 4 main answers, at least if you're talking to the pro Gamergate side. But I think most of these can be boiled down to 2 answers. So I guess the 4 answers, real quick: ethics in games journalism. Pretty much everybody involved agrees that that's what Gamergate was about. But when it comes away from the ethics in games journalism portion, people have very different ideas. So for some people, they wanted to make it about artistic freedom. I was in that camp during Gamergate. I believe that ethics and artistic freedom were sort of the 2 pillars of Gamergate. Other people would say that it was more about gaming industry issues as well. So they wanted to tackle things like loot boxes in games, microtransactions, corrupt industry practices, essentially, or not even necessarily corrupt industry practices, but industry practices that were anti-consumer. So there were people who wanted to bring in things in that direction, and then there were people also who were sort of culture warriors, and they wanted to fight a culture war in the gaming industry. So those were like sort of like the four main camps. I think you can maybe boil that down to two camps, which is the ethics and games journalism prong of Gamergate. And I actually recently, going through even some of my old stuff, because I made a ton of YouTube videos about Gamergate, most of which haven't survived. But I went through one of my old interviews, or debates actually. I debated an anti-Gamergater named 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 in 2017. And this happened to be one of the few things that I had from that time period that survived. So and during that interview or that discussion, I defined Gamergate as the two prongs as being ethics and games journalism, and an opposition to those who would gatekeep the industry to exclude others, essentially. And I'm like, well, that's actually a pretty good definition of Gamergate that I had in 2017. Because I think that the artistic freedom stuff, which we can get into that more if you want, but that, and also the concerns about censorship that people had, both in terms of like online communities and various things like that, and also some of the culture war stuff, though not all of it, like easily falls under that gatekeeping umbrella. So as for how it started, I know, I'm sorry,
No,
I'm very long-winded.
Take your time.
As for how it started, basically there was this guy who wrote a blog post about his girlfriend originally, and in the blog post he claimed that his ex-girlfriend was abusive to him and that she cheated on him with 5 people, including 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 a games journalist at Kotaku. And this blew up into this relatively like minor scandal at the time, sort of like a drama scandal like we see all the time in our space, the Twitch poll space, right?
Yeah.
So it was sort of like this like minor drama scandal mostly. And some people were talking about that. A lot of YouTubers jumped in, were making videos and stuff talking about that, especially since 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 had written 3 articles about Quinn or her games. Zoe Quinn was the game developer, and Aaron Joni was the boyfriend. 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 was the games journalist. These 3 people. 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 had written, one of the articles might have been before Quinn and Grayson had a relationship, so I don't want to hit Grayson over that one really. But there were 2 that had ethical violations. One, he promoted her game over 49 other games, and in the other one, it wasn't like the world's biggest scandal, the 3rd article, but he reported on the Polaris Game Jam controversy at the time, which was this minor controversy as well. And he quotes her in the story. She was involved in the controversy, and he doesn't dig super deep into what happened there. And maybe if he wasn't in a relationship with her, he would have dug a little bit deeper and be like, actually some of the stuff involving the controversy, involving this Polaris Game Jam is a little bit suspicious. Maybe we should investigate that further. But he didn't investigate it further. But also, I'm not sure he would have done that anyway. So
let's cap this, because you've said a lot of things. Okay, so in your opinion, the inciting incident of where this all blew up was a manifesto or a letter or a expose written by a ex-boyfriend of someone. Zoe Quinn, was that her name?
Yes, that's her name.
Yeah, so in this blog post or whatever, he accuses her of cheating on him with a games journalist of some sort from Kotaku.
Yes.
And this person basically was, again, according to the accusation, promoting her game over other people's games. Basically?
Well, not according to the accusation. There's a lot of independent evidence to verify what happened. So right before, I believe it was the 2nd article, I can link you this video I did at the time that happened to survive, where I go through all the evidence regarding the Nathan Grayson controversy. They had like a long relationship, it seemed, on Twitter, like a friendship, and they were hanging out and going to conventions together, and they were he actually said he would burn down the games industry if she ever quit. and that was said the day after his article promoting her game came out. And then the relationship was confirmed because Stephen Totillo, the editor-in-chief of Kotaku, he actually came out and said that they were in a relationship, but he says that he didn't review her game, which is true. He never reviewed her game. That is true. But he did promote it in an article that wasn't a review. And he's
So what does
also
that
listed in
mean?
the
Hold on.
credits.
Hold on. I gotta get my terms right. When you say he's promoting her game, it wasn't a review, but he's promoting her game. What do you mean?
So he wrote an article called Admission Quest, Valve greenlights 50 new games. So in this article, her game is the only one that have screenshots of the game itself in the article. I can link you the article. I'm sure I could find it pretty quick.
Please do, actually. Yeah.
And he also calls it a powerful twine darling and a standout. Though he does promote 2 other games over the list as well. Though I think it's safe to say that his coverage, his promotion of his discussion rather of this game was greater than the other 2 that he also promoted. But yeah, let me pull it up. Admission Quest.
Yeah. I guess like it feels like a very small thing to start something that again has been a word that has been thrown around on the internet for years, right? Gamergate is so many things to so many different people. So this feels like a nothing burger almost, right? Like someone basically was even if it's all true, someone was sleeping around and got their game promoted over someone else's game. So what? I guess is a question. So what?
Yeah, I think it is a relatively minor scandal. Now, it is worth noting that in this same 2-week time period, there were other scandals that were uncovered as well in games journalism. Patricia Hernandez, she written articles promoting her friend's game, Anna Anthropy, and she didn't disclose that she was her roommate. And then also Danielle Reindow of Polygon. Also, this is all within 2 weeks. Danielle Reindow of Polygon. She wrote a review, a 10 out of 10 review of Gone Home, and she didn't disclose that she's friends with the developer, not the developer, I'm sorry, the composer of the game's soundtrack. But again, these are all relatively minor controversies for the most part.
Yeah, it just
But the games press,
go ahead.
They weren't initially very receptive to implementing reforms in the wake of this controversy, of these scandals, and they decided to do something really stupid on August 28th, 2014. They decided there were, I think it was 19. I can double check. Normally I have this stuff off the top of my head. They had written 19 articles on the same day. Well, actually, so there were 10 on the same day, and then 9 additional articles over the coming days that had called for an end to the gamer identity. Sometimes they're called the gamers are dead article.
Hold on, an end to the gamer identity? What does that mean?
Yeah. So it depends because not all the articles are the same. But like Leah Alexander's article, she is heavily critical of the gamer identity, quote unquote, the idea of gamers, and because she has a long list of reasons, but she outlines that it's like they're whaling hyper consumers essentially, who's, we can just read, we can pull it up here. It's quite a hostile article, and then there's also, right, yeah, pull it up here.
Okay, I get what you're saying now. Basically,
And,
they were making fun of people who consider themselves gamers.
yeah, and then there was also Devin Wilson's article too with Gamasutra. This also was one of the Gamers Are Dead articles. He actually creates a list of rules for game developers to follow moving forward, and he wants games to be less competitive, to have less sexualized characters in them, and to be less violent.
Now, when you say that, that's fair, right? Like, look, so you say like things like that they're writing all these articles about how basically saying that gamers are spoiled entitled brats. Pretty much, yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Basically?
I think that's
Yeah.
well, I mean, like you could frame Leah Alexander's article I think basically is saying that Devin Wilson's article is a bit different. He focuses more on the industry and the types of games that should be made
Well,
and shouldn't be made.
I
But
asked this to basically kind of ask the next question I'm going to ask, which is, um, was this not kind of in response to some of the again, you're the expert, I'm not, but this was kind of in response to the reaction towards people like the Zoe Quinn and how people were treating uh, game journalists in general, right? Um, as I understand it, it was kind of like a pushback, a kind of like a swipe at them because they felt that they were under attack. Does that make sense?
yeah, that's how some people see it. There's so
Hmm.
many different. We probably will never know for sure why they wrote these articles. I've interviewed Liana Kersner. She's a
Yeah.
feminist media critic
Okay.
and a games journalist herself. She's also a pretty big YouTuber as well, who talks about games from a sex positive feminist perspective. Um, she was in the industry at the time when this happened, and she says that they wanted to write the article sooner, um, but that supposedly Zoe Quinn asked them not to because she wanted privacy, and then because Anita Sarkeesian's video blew up at the time, they decided they wanted to write the article anyway. But then other people say that this was an idea that has its roots going back until, if you look at like the Mass Effect controversy around the Mass Effect 3 ending, there was a lot of gamers are entitled articles. Well, not a lot. There were a few. There were a few gamers are entitled articles coming out at that time about the Mass Effect 3 ending because people were upset about that. Some people say it has its origins in that. Other people say, and I haven't looked into this part of it too much, but other people say that the origins of this gamers are over this idea has its roots going back to the late 2000s. So there's like so many different reasons, but it could be that they wanted to come out and basically be a little bit hostile and attack the people who they thought were bad,
Sure.
and just kind of painted with too broad of a brush,
Hmm.
and basically threw like all gamers, quote unquote, into this umbrella.
Well, it sounds like it backfired, right? Because you said this was a stupid decision. Can you elaborate on that? Why was this stupid, in your opinion?
Well, I think one, the articles, especially Alexander's article and Wilson's article, they they ended up creating a massive backlash, especially when all these articles, 10 of them came out on one day, and then 9 additional ones over the next few days. It looked very, very bad. It looked like, okay, there's possibly some sort of collusion or coordination going on here. It also, we don't like them saying all these negative things about gamers. A lot of people have positive associations with that term, and they consider themselves gamers. I think that's good. And also, it just doesn't seem like the the right approach or the ethical approach when people are criticizing you over alleged corruption to then just start attacking gamers as a whole. Um, they should have. They could say, look, I don't think people should talk about Zoe Quinn's personal life, but why don't we come out and we implement a couple reforms? We recognize there is a real problem here. Some of the games journalists are too close with the game developers. So we should be more careful moving forward. Let's create ethics policies, and some of them did, but that happened later. But they should have just been more responsive, uh, or even if they just ignored the controversy. Like, these are again relatively minor controversies um,
Yeah.
outside of the
Yeah.
gaming sphere. They could have just ignored them, and people would have probably gone away. Though I've talked to many people, and I asked them this question: if they would have just ignored it, would Gamergate still have happened or sort of blown up? And a lot of people say yes. They say it would have happened later, though. They say that because the nepotism and corruption was so widespread within the industry, as well as some of these gatekeeping mentalities, that there probably still would have been a Gamergate. Maybe it would have been a year or two later or 3 years later, but probably it still would have happened.
When you say happened, right? Like we talked about the inciting incident, in your opinion, right? Of this letter and these kind of all these kind of minor scandals, then the response to it by the games journalists, if you will, and then what happened? Like, so it sounds like it was like oil and water didn't really mix. and then you had some sort of reaction at a whole. What can you give us like just a broad brush, broad strokes of some of uh, the, the kind of main threads of Gamergate as it was occurring? Like, what were some of the main events, if you will?
Yeah, so there were like it changed over time. But let's in the beginning, the first few months, there's people are just mostly talking about it, and they're also engaging in a few like operations. So these are basically
Operations? What do you mean?
people coming together and working together towards like common goals. So one of those operations was called Operation Disrespectful Nod. And this was a large number of people sending emails to the advertisers of the allegedly corrupt websites to try and get them to pull out advertising unless they implemented reforms, like creating ethics policies and things like that.
A
Another thing that people were
boycott
doing was
campaign, basically, right?
basically, yeah.
Okay.
And then another one was Operation UV, ultraviolet light. Um, and in that operation, people contacted the Federal Trade Commission, I believe it was, and or was it the? I think it was the FTC. Um, and they tried to get the government to step in and require the companies to provide disclosure of paid sponsorships, which actually is a thing now, which is great. I'm not saying that Gamergate caused that to happen. Maybe it had some minor role in that, but that's obviously a good change. I'm happy with that. Other things too, people made deep freeze, right? Deep freeze. This was mostly Bone Golem's brainchild, though he did get help from some other people, where they wanted to catalog the ethical violations and keep track of. So the idea was to create a watchdog group, right? So Deep Freeze was like this watchdog group that was supposed to keep track of the ethical violations from these gaming sites and from the games journalists and provide evidence for like, okay, this writer gave this game a review of a 10 out of 10, but it turns out that they went to dinner on 3 different occasions as outlined on their own personal Twitter feed where they talk about this, and things like that. Like Leigh Alexander, she actually did promote Anna Anthropy as well. The same games journalist that Christian Hernandez promoted, she promoted her games, and they were talking about going to dinner on Twitter all the time. Well, not all the time, on 2 different occasions, and appeared to be close friends, communicating with each other constantly, and never disclosed any of this. So, like keeping track of these sort of things, that way people could know, okay, I'm reading a review at IGN. So, how do I know that IGN or this writer at IGN can be trusted? And you can go into Deep Freeze and you can see, okay, here's how many issues IGN has had that we have found, and also how many times have they issued corrections.
Is the issuing corrections a good indicator or a bad? Because I can see it going both ways, right? So issuing corrections shows that you're willing to take new information into account, you acknowledge you've made a mistake, and adjust. I think that could be a good thing, correct? But then if you're correcting almost every other article, you have to kind of ask yourself, okay, why aren't we getting it right the first time? Does that make sense? So what do you think?
Yeah, I think corrections are great. I think that it does show at least that the company, if not the editor in chief, if not the individual journalist, is at least trying to do a good job. Now, it can be the case that like somebody I don't know of any specific examples of this happening, um, where they issue correction after correction is correction, especially after this for the same games journalist in their articles, and they never learn their lesson, even after getting corrected dozens of times. I don't know of a case where that's happened. Um, but like obviously, if they're not actually learning and they're like half-hearted fake apologies, and they don't change their behavior, I think that would be a problem.
Yeah, well, yes, I think that absolutely is true. But again, if you don't have any examples, then it's hard to really talk about it other than in the kind of abstract. I guess if you had to who are the major figures, not at the beginning, but overall, if you had to point to the top 3 anti-gamergaters, for example, who would you name?
Well, I think some of the anti-Gamergate people would disagree with the idea of them being anti-Gamergate. Um, they would categorize themselves as critics of Gamergate.
Sure, Gamergate critics.
Um,
What I mean by are those like obviously there's more than two sides here, but for the sake of discussion, right? Those who are more critical of Gamergate than others, if you will.
Well, one of them I think 𝕵𝖎𝖎 Wu,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also Zoe Quinn has been very critical of Gamergate. So has 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 Sarkeesian, but there are others as well, like Innuendo Studios, the YouTuber, or Hoax1. He's a power moderator on Reddit. Well, I don't know, power moderator. He moderates several different communities, including 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙, one of the anti-Gamergate communities on Reddit, and which is the largest one on Reddit, actually, the largest anti-Gamergate community on Reddit. And then also he moderated the Against Gamergate debate subreddit, which was more of a neutral meeting ground.
What was their main critics of the movement? Criticisms
Well,
of the movement, I should say.
those specific, but people disagree with Gamergate for different reasons. I guess they would say it depends on who you ask, but like if you're talking about like 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, and 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙 Wu specifically, those three people, they would say that Gamergate was a harassment campaign to drive women out of gaming and to harass women out of the industry, basically, and out of the community, the gaming community. Um, those are like their claims. But there's also like people who disagree with Gamergate because they think that it became more anti-SJW, quote unquote, over time, and they don't like the direction that took.
Did
So
it?
like Bash Fluff, yeah, I think so. I
Okay.
think it did. That's fair to say. I don't think everybody was that, but there definitely was a lot of dislike of social justice warriors, quote unquote, during that period from Gamergate people, especially the longer it went on.
And how long did it go on? Like from start to finish, quote unquote. How long of a time did this movement span or this incident span? Would you call it a movement or an incident? What do you think?
Opinions differ on this. I think movement's fine. Some people say they prefer incident or just hashtag even. But I think it's fair to call it a movement. And how long did it go on for? That they're going to get different opinions on that too. I was involved from 2015 to 2018, so I think it's safe to say, as I was watching it happen, and I was a YouTuber at the time covering the topic quite a bit actually. I'd say that the movement had basically died down by like early 2018, and there wasn't a whole lot happening after that. But there are some people who say that they wanted to keep the flame going up until this day. Even there's a couple people on V, one of the 8chan boards, who I think still think it's happening, but that's like a few people. I don't think that's like a mainstream perspective. I think I'd say up until about 2018 roughly, and 2018 is also when we had the last quote official Gamergate meetups, the ones that were publicly advertised. There was a San Francisco meetup. There was the meetup in St. Louis, which I ran. And then there was the in-person debate at that meetup in 2018. But aside from those two events in 2018, there wasn't really much happening. 2017 was still pretty active though for most of the year.
When you say active, what did what do you mean by active? Like, because again, from what I heard, right? Again, I wasn't online during this time. I wasn't involved at all. Um, but from what I have heard said, that the activity involved basically death threats, doxing, harassment, um, etc. So when you say incident, what do you mean?
Oh, what do you mean when you say active? What do you mean? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, like you were saying it's active and there were still incidents happening, there's still events occurring and things like that. So my question would be, what do you mean by that?
Uh, I I I would say that people involved with the movement were still actively doing things, like whether that's hosting meetups or convention panels or even running like an operation like ODN, which still did keep going for several years after 2014, though I think it became less effective over time. But like people doing stuff and people having a high level of interest in talking about the
Yeah,
topic.
doing
There
stuff
was
is so broad though, my friend. Like doing stuff could mean panels, it could mean like organizing death threats, right? Like so I guess I'm
yeah
just trying to get I'm just trying to wrap my head around like why it blew up and why it's kind of ebbed, if you will.
Well, I want to say up front right now, obviously, I don't condone anybody who engaged in death threats or
Sure,
anything
sure,
like
sure.
that or doxing. And I have investigated and covered this part of the story as part of this book. I ask everybody. There's a battery of harassment slash sexism related questions. Um, I don't think that the movement was motivated by harassing people. I don't think there's really good evidence to tie Gamergate to the death threats, Gamergate supporters. I can't find a single example of a Gamergate supporter who had sent death threats, though 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 and probably the other two as well did receive lots of, or not lots of, actually, quite a few it seemed. But there's an FBI report on Gamergate where the FBI was investigating the harassment claims. And someone did call in two different bomb threats and a mass shooting threat into one of 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜's speaking engagements at a college.
That
And
seems pretty
while it's
extreme. Yeah.
no, it definitely does. And we don't know who did this. The FBI did end up talking to one person, uh, though it looks like they might have been a minor, and he just apologized and was like, "I won't do it again." There's no evidence he was a Gamergate person, I should say. Um, I don't know if he's the one who specifically called in those bomb threats, but the FBI did talk with him and did warn him that that kind of behavior is not allowed. And then he apparently apologized over that behavior.
Well, we don't have to like take it to the extremes here. We could just I guess in your opinion, did the movement make it more hostile for women to work in either A, the gaming industry, or B, games journalism?
I don't think so. I don't think that the movement was motivated by that. I don't think that they supported that.
Well,
Now,
whether it was
could it be?
motivated by it or not, I mean, right? Like we can imagine a scenario where they could have the best of intentions, but because of how they are acting and how they're going about it, it turns into something that makes it more toxic, to use a overused term, right? For certain types of people within an industry. So, do you think that the way that the GamerGate in general conducted itself um, was amenable, or I guess was it harmful to women in the industry, the games industry or the journalism industry?
No, I don't think so. Though I do think perhaps it might be the case that the way the media talked about it and misrepresented the movement did maybe deter someone who was like, "Well, maybe I want to be a game developer," and then they watch the news and they see like, "Oh, game developers are getting death threats and getting driven out of the industry, or people want to drive them out of the industry. Maybe I won't go in that career field." And I think that that's unfortunate because I want to see more games being made, and I want to see more people making great games, and I don't care what their gender is. um, Obviously I think there can be a lot of good that comes from having diverse voices in the industry and hearing different perspectives. Like I was talking with Liana Kersner, and she was talking about Mass Effect and how if you have how you can't make a game like Mass Effect with all these different varied alien species with their own cultures and things like that if everybody thinks exactly the same way. So you do need to have diversity of thought, and part of that does include perhaps diversity of lived experiences and backgrounds, so that you can come up with these amazing game worlds and explore different cultures, whether that's in Star Trek or Mass Effect or something else.
Interesting. You mentioned how the media portrayed Gamergate, and I want to talk about that. I do have a super chat I want to ask you as well. But before I do that, since that's written down, my question's only in my head, and I'll forget it if I don't ask it. Um, you mentioned that the media misportrayed Gamergate as something it was not. Can you give us some examples of that?
Well, actually, that's a good question. I guess one example would be Jason Schreier's article. Now, Jason Schreier does do good work sometimes, but he's also kind of an asshole. His article about the Mateus Pradas, I think his name was. He's this games journalist in Brazil called 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. I better get this name right if I'm gonna make an accusation.
Yeah. It would help if you have this information. I mean, you got all the research, right? So
Yeah. I don't talk about this
so
particular
I
topic
understand.
super, well, this particular aspect
So
super
like for
well.
example, in my chat, Cardis is saying the media is saying there was a far right movement of misogynists. But when we say the media, like the only time I've heard about Gamergate, honestly, was in this space, right? In the severely online space, right? When it was going on, I didn't hear about it because I wasn't on social media. I didn't know what was happening, right? So when we talk about the media, I'm curious whether it be things like CBS or CNN, or if we're talking about the media being, I don't know, Kotaku, right?
Yeah, and I think it's both. I mean, both did a pretty bad job for the most part. Um, but they mostly just they didn't really interview any. I think the problem was mostly that they didn't really interview or talk to anybody involved with Gamergate. They just ran with the narrative that, oh, they're just a bunch of sexists, and they'd interview a couple games journalists, or they'd interview 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, and they'd say that, but they didn't reach out to anybody involved with the movement, with some exceptions. Like Brad Glasgow, I think, did a pretty good job. But we can bring up the Jason Schreier thing if you want. I don't think it's like the best example. It's just one that I was looking into earlier today, so it's on the top of my mind. But Jason Schreier wrote an article in Kotaku about this Brazilian games journalist named Matheus Prado Sousa. And it turns out he was like one of the main people sending death threats to 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 on Twitter. Allegedly, he had multiple different accounts, and he was sending her these death threats. And it was Gamergate supporters, people on the pro Gamergate side, who ended up exposing this guy as being behind the threats. And Jason Schreier, in his article where he writes about this, he says this my gosh, how do I pronounce this guy's name? Mr. Sousa. Mr. Sousa's comments come out of the atmosphere of Gamergate. When it's like, well, you yourself even recognized earlier in that Gamergate people were the one who exposed this guy. So why are you trying to like link Gamergate to the threats that he was sending by saying that it represents an atmosphere? But there were so many articles that came out that basically just said that Gamergate hates women, that Gamergate is a harassment campaign, and that's basically all they ran with without talking to a single person involved.
Interesting. Couple questions from my chat. And this is $5 from 𝕵𝖬𝖎. To say, ask him about the time Brianna Wu pretended to have been chased from her home by death threats while giving interviews from her home office. So I'm asking you about that.
Okay. This is actually something I wanted to avoid in this project, talking about the anti-Gamergate people too much, especially those three specific people who claimed that Gamergate was a harassment campaign against them. But as time went on, I realized it's part of the story. I got to cover it. And then two, I saw some pretty bad receipts. So Brianna Wu's claim about having fled her home doesn't appear to be true. She actually, the weekend she fled her home is the weekend she actually went to a convention where she was supposed to be speaking at. And as regards to her doing interviews from her office, I know that there is some evidence to that effect. I've looked through it. It's a little bit difficult to parse. Some of it involves like, well, if you look at like this, well, actually, one of them was the ABC interview, which we can. So she did an interview with ABC News, which is available on YouTube. And in that interview, she's in her office, and she's talking about being. She didn't say she called Gamergate a terrorist group, but she didn't.
Okay.
She did that interview from her office after earlier claiming that she fled her home, and then also the weekend that she fled her home, she didn't. That doesn't appear to be true because she went to a convention, and she even tweeted out, "Hey, I'm at the con. Anyone want to hang out?" And she was a scheduled speaker there.
Okay. Fair enough.
So
Fair
that,
enough.
that claim doesn't seem to be accurate.
Fair enough.
But there's
Gotcha.
also other claims involving her that are wild too. Like her whole story is actually really insane. Uh, like she, before she was a quote unquote victim of Gamergate, she ran a Twitter account called 𝕵𝖎𝖎, in which she pretended to be a Gamergate supporter and trolled them for several weeks. Um, and was saying really dumb stuff on purpose to try and make Gamergate look bad.
Fair
But
enough.
that
Many
but that
such
that part
cases.
doesn't get talked about in the media too often or ever really.
Well, it's one of those things where like, yeah, no, I can absolutely believe that happened. I've known people in this space do similar things. They'll make an account, right, and they'll um basically say a bunch of wild stuff on an alt account, right, that they don't want tied to their main account. In some cases, they do it to stir up drama, right? I even have this happen in my DMs, right? Is someone will come to me in my DMs claiming so and so said such and such at this time and this place and things like that. When I look into it, it's just a bunch of bullshit. But no, I understand that. So
Oh,
I
I do want to
guess
be fair though and provide her perspective on that
hmm,
event, because she did publicly comment on it. She did
yeah,
say that she was trying to satirize the Gamergate supporters by pretending to be one of them, and it was an act of satire. That's what she
that's
says.
fair.
There's also something involving her and Steam Greenlight, which is very interesting. Um,
And I
but we don't have
promise
to
you
get
I'll talk to Brianna Wu about this too, right? I might, if she wants to, have her on and go over it. But as of now, you're free to give your side basically.
Well, I always try to be fair when I talk about try to stick to the facts.
Yeah, no, that's important to do, right? But again, it's all on how you frame a fact, right? We can talk about the Israel-Palestine. I think is a great example of how people can use facts and run with it in either direction to paint the other side as monsters or something. But no, I understand what you're saying. $10 more from Artemis Fowl to say misportrayed is an interesting thought. Games Journal's pros and the journal list are two chat groups that had game devs and journalists and who intentionally decided on the narrative of Gamergate. What are your thoughts on
Well,
that?
so this is interesting. He mentioned two things: Game Journal pros, which you could argue that and frame it that way. The journalist scandal, though, was actually before Gamergate, and that involved mainstream journalists, not games journalism. But when it comes to Game Journal pros, it was this mailing group. There's basically you could call it a chat room, basically, a mailing list of games journalists from competing publications. And in there are some things that do raise eyebrows, but nothing directly tying it to the Gamers Are Dead articles specifically. So they do talk about 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, the editor in chief of the Escapists at the time, and they encouraged him to censor his forums more. They also talked about blacklisting two specific individuals, a games journalist named 𝕬𝖎𝖙, and there was a game developer they tried to blacklist as well, though I don't remember his name off the top of my head.
Why were they
And
being blacklisted?
well, 𝕬𝖎𝖙, he wrote an article. I'm not super familiar with this part of the story. I know that they talked about um, basically making him a non-person in the industry, but apparently he'd written an article about a trans game developer who was raising money for something, but it turns out that the money was actually being used for gender reassignment surgery, instead of what they were talking about it publicly being advertised as being for. And he exposed that. I believe that's the story, but I've not researched that whole 𝕬𝖎𝖙 scandal super deep, so I don't want to get too lost in the weeds with it because I don't
Okay.
know all the facts.
No, I'm
But
just
they were
again.
very progressive people. A lot of them were, and so they thought that was really bad.
I'm just. This is one of the things that I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around is why everyone is so up in arms about what happens in every industry all the time, right? This isn't like I can't think of an industry that doesn't have stuff like this go on, right? Where if your friend, like one of the reasons you go to business school or things like that and you take business in college is to network. So I guess what would the difference be between having a network of connections that you could reach out to and get information from and report on, right? And source for your reporting versus what these people were accused of, which is basically being friends with someone, so promoting their game. What's the main difference here?
Well, I think there's two different approaches you could take. One of which is to say that you should avoid all conflicts of interest or appearances thereof. Another is to say that you can. This is what Michael Koretsky says. Well, he says both really, but he believes that disclosure is enough. Michael Koretsky is a regional director for the Society of Professional Journalists. I've interviewed him. He's a journalist who did a very good job covering Gamergate. Even hosted a conference at the Society of Professional Journalists about the topic called Airplay, which has a documentary that just came out about it recently, and it's a pretty good documentary. He argues that you can do pretty much anything you want as long as you're very upfront with the readers and the audience. That okay, look, I have this connection with this person. That way, you know my biases going in. You know that okay, look, I'm friends with this person, or whatever it happens to be. I've taken well, actually, probably taking bribes is probably like a whole different level.
Taking look, if the accusation is they paid me money to give them a good review, that's a different thing than at least everything that you've said so far. Everything you've said so far are things like, it was my roommate who I'm friends with and we go out to dinner sometimes, which again, like, I'm thinking of this from my perspective, right? I'm not a journalist, but I am a streamer who does interviews. I have panels. I talk about the various goings on. I have relationships with the people I'm talking to and about in a lot of cases, right? I have worked with them. I've DM'd them. I've hung out with them in certain cases at TwitchCon or things like that. So does that make what I'm saying corrupt? I don't know if it does.
As long as you're upfront about it, I think it's fine. And I actually kind of ran into this myself a little bit with this project, because one of the people I interviewed, and who I'm not like super close friends with this person, but we do talk, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, she's writing an article about my project and publishing it. Well, in theory, we'll see if it gets published in this magazine. And I was like, well, let's just make sure that we disclose that you participated in the project. Well, not me, because I didn't write the article, but like just make sure you disclose it, because we want to make sure that we're all above board with how we do this.
No, that makes sense.
So I think as long as you're upfront about that, I think it's probably fine.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that might be the mistake that was made. It sounds like, is instead of just being like, oh yeah, we network and we hang out, and I mean, in a niche, because let's be real, games journalism is a niche topic, right? It's not something that's mainstream, widespread. Unless you specifically seek it out, you're not going to find it, right? It's I don't know. I don't know what else to say than, yeah, of course they hang out or interact with game developers. Why would they not? And of course, they're going to have developers they like and developers they don't like. How could they not? We're all just human at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's probably fine. Though there is maybe a separate issue. I don't know if this is like a corruption issue necessarily, but I do think that the nepotism and the incestuous nature, I guess you could say, of the game journalists and game developers, especially in the indie scene, they are just like way too close with each other, probably. Like, yes, they should be disclosing it, and maybe that'll be enough, but it does seem like, because a lot of these people are friends with each other, and because a lot of them share the same political views, they're very hyper progressive people. A lot of them are, which is fine. They're entitled to their opinion. It seems like perhaps because of this, they also are drowning out other voices.
Well,
so game developers who aren't in the clique, they perhaps have more difficulty getting their projects mentioned in positive ways, or even mentioned at all.
That's true, but it's true in everywhere. Like other journalism, mainstream journalism, you bet your bottom dollar that that's true too. These people attend each other's bar mitzvahs. They go to each other's Christmas parties, right? They are cliquey. This is not different in other industries as well. If you want to progress in your career, you make friends with the people who make those decisions, right? That's just how it that's just networking 101. I get how it can be frustrating if you're on the outside, right? I get how it can be like, damn, I'm as good as those people are. I wish I could break in, right? Um I don't know, there are just ways to do that that don't involve, I don't know, just all these accusations. Does that make sense?
Accusations of the harassment or accusations of the corruption?
Both, right? Like, I think that, like, again, as someone who does not know much about Gamergate except for what I've heard is it like all this could be avoided, right? If they had simply just been like, yeah, uh, I don't like this game developer. I think that he or she makes shitty games because of their politics. And then the person was like, yeah, of course I make games based on my politics. If you don't like it, don't buy it. I just don't understand. I, I'm hesitant to see why it's making so many people so angry.
Yeah, well, some of the people who were involved with Gamergate were game developers, sometimes AAA, sometimes indie. Like game diviner Paulo Munoz, he was an indie developer, and he felt like he was being excluded. That people weren't going to, he wasn't going to be able to succeed and get his product promoted through games journalism because of the clickishness. Now, I don't know what is to be done about that, and I don't care if people make accusations as long as they have the receipts
Sure.
to back it up. Like if Brianna Wu's being harassed by me or whatever, right? By all means, expose that. That's 100% fine. Or if a publication's engaging in some shady behavior, I think putting a spotlight on that is totally fine too. I don't know what you do about the
Hmm.
clickishness aspect,
Yeah.
other than like building your own media.
Well, so that's a one of the things for good or ill that streaming has allowed us to do, right? The rise of um, independent media is something that has been a blessing and a curse both in recent years, and I mean that can be a whole show in and of itself. Some more super chats, all from Artemis Fowl. Artemis Fowl, you're being very generous today. Thank you. $10 from Artemis Fowl to say, when those journalists are judges on contests that have real world money prizes, and when game review rankings were a basis for bonuses, the real issue is that the hobby is for escapism. I'm I would like you to elaborate that, Artemis Fowl, what you mean by that. But
Well, he's probably referring
hmm,
to a specific thing involving the IGDA, the Independent Game Developers Association. This is a topic that has been talked about a little bit during the Gamergate stuff. At the time, I could probably tell you more about it, but looking back, this has not been a primary focus of my research, and I don't know enough to comfortably talk about the alleged corruption involving the IGDA, or whether or not that's even legitimate. I know that some individuals associated with the IGDA have made some really weird statements over the years, but I don't know about specific corruption. I know that there are allegations on that. Short Fat Otaku actually did a video during Gamergate about this specific topic called Indefensible. You can find that online if you want to learn more, but I can't verify those specific claims myself. But I do want to bring
hmm,
it back to one thing you mentioned earlier, which is, they're this clique and their politics and their friends.
yeah, yeah,
Well, like one, it does. I think that some of the way they go about doing this, for sure, go, it does a disservice to gaming as an art form. It does a disservice to the game developers, and it does a disservice to the readers. Like when Wired gave a this was after Gamergate, a 1 out of 10 review to Hogwarts Legacy, and almost the entire review is the author of the article, of the reviewer complaining about J.K. Rowling and how they hate J.K. Rowling and she's a transphobe and a bigot, and so that's why she gave the game a 1 out of 10. That doesn't seem like it's fair to the game. It doesn't seem like it's fair to the developer, especially since that's going on Metacritic, where their game gets dinged now. and it doesn't seem fair to the consumer who's reading this article trying to learn more about Hogwarts Legacy
I
and
get
kind of
that.
review of it.
I understand that. I guess, though, the question would be if the game developer does believe what she wrote or he wrote. I'm not sure, right? Um, what they wrote about the game and the politics of the game. Should we disallow that? Right? Is that I understand how it does a disservice. Like clicks do a disservice. Groupthink hurts creativity, right? It's. I'm not arguing against that. What I'm arguing is it's hard to, like you said, it's almost impossible to avoid, right? If you avoid it in one instance, you're just gonna end up in another click of a different sort, a competing click, if you will, an echo chamber of our own kind of designs. And so try as we might, the gravity where we're being pulled towards is towards like-minded individuals, like-minded thinkers, like-minded people who share our beliefs and opinions, right? That's how now the internet has made that easier than ever to achieve, and that's again for good and ill, mostly in my opinion ill. But when it comes to things like games journalism, um yeah, I think anyone reading that review recognized it as bullshit, right? I mean,
I would hope so,
if
but
you're
like
if you're
the
going
thing
around,
is too, it wasn't even about the developer or their
yeah,
personal politics. It was about it being based on Harry Potter, which J.K. Rowling wrote, and she doesn't like J.K. Rowling, who, aside from her writing the book that the game is like lightly based off of, has nothing to do with the project. And I also don't think that like the developer's personal politics. I don't think you should ding a game their review score. Now, should it be allowed? Like, should it be illegal? Like, probably not. But I do think it's really poor form. If I think you should judge the
sure.
game based on its merits, not based on the developer's politics. Now, if you want to write an article saying like, "Hey, look, I personally don't like this because the developer is racist or whatever," and you have like receipts on that, like whatever, fine, I don't care. But like a review itself should probably be more
Hmm. I see
more
what you're
fair.
saying. So if they wanted to do an expose, you'd have no problem with it. But
Yeah,
because it was the
I
official
might
review,
disagree, but like I
sure, sure,
wouldn't
sure.
like say that it's outside the bounds of like what I expect.
I'm gonna be real. Like maybe it's because I never grew up um looking at the reviews of a game before I bought it, right? Like even now, I may give a cursory glance at the Steam reviews, maybe. But in general, I just, oh, is this interesting to me? Let's look, let's see what kind of genres it is, things like that. For me, I think that the worst thing about gaming isn't the journalism part, it's the microtransactions, it's the DLCs, it's the early access and all that. I think that while there are benefits to all of these things, it's generally creating worse games. But I think that's a separate topic in and of itself as
Well,
well,
some
right?
people say that is Gamergate related. There was a faction within Gamergate that did want to take things in that direction and take on those practices. Though I
Hmm.
do want to talk about Artemis Fowl's super chat. He
Which
says that
one?
games are his most recent. Well, I don't know about most recent, like the most recent one you read about games being a form of escapism. I think for a lot of people, games are that, and that's great. But I think also that games can also be an art form, and that's recognized by the Supreme Court now. And I think that games can tell stories in really unique ways and tell very interesting stories with amazing characters, and that the gameplay itself can also amplify amplify the artistic elements. Like Ace Combat 5, I think, is a pretty good example of that, of how interwoven the story is with the gameplay and the missions themselves. I think that that's also part of what games are too. And games aren't just one thing. Games can be so many different things, and different types of games can be different things to different people. Some games are might be more in the escapist category. Other games might be more in the high art category. Others might just be like indie experimental things that somebody wants to play around with and see what they can do. And in other ways, it could be like like soft core porn, right? Like Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball or something like that. I think that the industry is big enough um, for all these different types of games to be made and to exist, and for people to find the things that they enjoy and make the things that they enjoy.
I agree. $5 more from Artemis Fowl. My number, my her, Firechild and Artemis Fowl are competing to be my number one donors for today. and I appreciate the contest. But $5 from Artemis Val to say, don't mess with the people's escapism. Anti-GG hated their audiences and wanted a different one because they didn't align with their values. I mean, that is one perspective, right? I understand. Well, I understand hating your audience, right? I love my chat, but there is this push and pull between an audience and the developer, right? Or the content consumer and the content creator. And what is gaming but a content creation of a type, right? Of a specific type. And we can even argue what is a game, right? Like I don't know how I would define what a game is in real sense. Um, are we talking, does there have to be specific rules, right? Do they have to be told to the players? Is it something that has to, like, does it have to be something you can win, or is it simply an experience? I don't know the answer to these questions. What lessons should people who are looking back on Gamergate, who are looking back on all of this, what are the lessons you think that someone or the observer should take away from their experiences?
Gosh, I don't know. It's a tough question. It really is. I tried to answer this question actually to some extent in my first book at the very end, and in 2019, and I feel like it was probably the weakest chapter of the book. My answer back then, I think, was basically just hear each other out. But I mean, it was a bit more nuanced than that. Probably it was a whole chapter. But I think that basically, yeah, people need to. One thing that I'm focused on too, in terms of my politics, and I think it applies to gaming as well, is creating a culture and a society, and trying to promote a society that is pluralistic in nature, where people take into account a large number of differing viewpoints and engage in discussion and dialogue with one another. And that sounds like pretty bland and basic, but I think that part of the problem, part of what caused the main cause of Gamergate, really, um, and some of the other controversies and stuff we've been seeing over the past few years, past decade, is this closing of the Overton window, where people don't want to live in a pluralistic society anymore. And there's people like that on the left and the right. I think about a decade ago, the left, at least in the gaming sphere and other cultural spheres, adopted that attitude more and more. And they still do in many cases. Like there's certain topics where you almost can't touch them, or else you're considered to be an enemy of society in these people's eyes, essentially. And there's people on the right who hold that same view, right? And I think that we need to move beyond that and recognize that we're all trying to build a better society, a better gaming industry together, or at least most people are. And we probably shouldn't close and shrink the Overton window to such an extent that we're excluding half the country from the conversation.
But certainly we can have a conversation about excluding some voices, correct? Right? Like when we're talking about like participation in a hobby or identification within a hobby, right? Should there not be some kind of at least broad strokes that one would have to do in order to be considered a gamer or a game journalist or a game developer, etc.?
I don't know how to answer the question the way you framed it.
I could try to
think
phrase
it might be better to say
gatekeeping.
Let me
Isn't there a
yeah.
good things?
Is there? Are you asking basically if there are certain lines that individuals could cross that make them essentially that they should be gate kept out, right?
Yeah, that that game or not people. Though people are matter too, but like practices or ways of doing things or principles that one would put in their game or in how they interact with games that we could just say this is simply unacceptable. And so we are drawing a line here. We are not doing this anymore. Like I think an easy one, as you did earlier, right? death threats, harassment, etc. Bad.
Oh yeah,
We
sure. Actions that people take, I
yeah
agree.
yeah yeah.
Though I am a bit more in the free speech absolutist camp when it comes to like large social media platforms, I think. Though I've that's my current perspective on it. I'm much more
Well, I'm
free
talking
speech
about the
absolutist in that
gaming
regard. But actions,
industry specifically. Yeah.
yeah, if people are harassing people, sending death threats, yeah, 1,000%, that should be whatever. You get banned from Xbox Live or whatever it is, right? Or you get fired if you're a game developer who's doxing people. Which actually, one of the developers at Ubisoft um, did actually dox Gamergate supporters as part of this group called 𝕻𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. He was a member of this group.
What? Zack
Uh,
Attack?
Pal, 𝕻𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔 was this doxing group that some of the anti-Gamergate people made to go after a specific individual in Gamergate known as 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. Um, we don't have to get like super lost in the weeds if you don't want to, but uh, the Pal Hofstein, this game developer with Ubisoft, was actually in this group, as well as other people, including 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, who's part of Zoe. He's a volunteer for Zoe Quinn's Crash Override Network, though he did get fired for this. To be fair, and he also worked for the trust and safety team at Amazon, and he was one of the main people in the doxing group as well as I think like 8 or 10 other people, and they wanted to go after 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, this Gamergate supporter that they didn't like because she was like the most popular person in Gamergate on Twitter, at least. Probably the most retweeted person. I don't have like the exact numbers of all the retweets that she got versus other people, but she was extremely popular in GG at the time, and they wanted to try and out her because they thought, well, 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, there's no way like a woman could hold the views that she does, even though like I don't think she's ever said anything outside of like like normal mainstream discourse. But they didn't like her that she was a supporter of the movement, so they wanted to expose her as being a man and dox her. But she wasn't a man, and her and another Gamergate supporter named Rudderhouse. Rudderhouse pretended to be a social justice warrior and an anti-Gamergate person, and he infiltrated their community as part of this long psyop. And he,
Many such cases, as I said, when you were talking about Brianna Wu doing the same thing in reverse kind of deal.
yeah, yeah.
Fair
But
enough.
anyway, he networked in and he leaked all their chat logs, because they created a fake dox of 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙 and Rudderhouse went through and made a whole bunch of like fake information, like a fake Facebook page and all this stuff, to try and see if the anti-Gamergate people would take the bait.
Yeah, honeypot basically. Well, not a honeypot,
Yeah,
right? But
honeypot, and they
it's not a honeypot.
did, and
Honeypot's
he
different,
leaked
but
all their chat logs, exposing them as trying to dox her,
damn.
and it trended on hashtag as hashtag 𝕻𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 because the fake profile they created was named Zachary Miller.
This is a lot, right? Like the amount of the links that these people are going to, right? Whether it be calling in mass shooting or bomb threats or making a doxing list or something. I I guess I just don't have the passion for this, right? Like I can't imagine a scenario where if I really don't like someone on Twitter, you know what I do? I mute them. Then I never see them again. So I'm just trying to get myself into a headspace where I could understand the actions of someone who is engaging in this kind of thing. And the only way I can do that is by seeing them as some sort of existential threat to something I love, such as my job or games journalism or gaming or whatever. So I guess, was Gamergate really such a threat to the industry?
Well, I don't think Gamergate was. I think Gamergate was like a loose organization or a loose movement of a large number of people,
Hmm.
probably over 10,000, uh, who were upset about games journalism, were upset about perceived attacks on artistic freedom in the industry and attempts to gatekeep the industry, and they wanted to see reforms being made within games journalism. They wanted to see the attacks on game developers stop because there was a period of time, the spring of 2015, where there were a large number of controversies where groups of people on social media would try to pressure game developers to take stuff out of their games, or in comic book artists too, actually. Like the comics, it was the Batgirl alternate, the change the cover controversy, where people didn't, some of the progressive people, or the social justice people, or whatever you want to call them, they were really unhappy about this alternative Batgirl cover. It wasn't even the main cover for the comic book, but it made a reference to the Killing Joke, and they thought that that was sexist and bad because the Killing Joke features Batgirl in it when she's Oracle. I'm not a comic book reader. But anyway, they
The
thought
Killing
it was
Joke was the
sexist.
Joker's origin story, I thought. Am I wrong?
Yeah, but in there's supposedly, I've not read the comic, but supposedly there's a scene that implies that maybe the Joker sexually assaulted Batgirl. And so having the Joker on the cover holding a gun next to her head, they thought that that was promoting like sexual violence. And so they tried to pressure the artist to change the cover, which I thought is a bad tactic to use when you're trying to create these hashtag mobs to swarm people. And then there was also a number of other controversies too. The Pillars of Eternity controversy involving the Tombstone, the Lionhead Studios controversy involving them tweeting out an asset from their game, which featured a busty woman.
And people have too much time in their hands. $5 more from Artemis Val to say, didn't anti-GG call in a bomb threat on the SPJ convention? Is that true?
Well, we don't know who called in the bomb threat necessarily, but there have been 3 different Gamergate events have received bomb threats. The Gamergate meetup in Melbourne received a bomb threat in Australia. The Gamergate meetup in District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. received a bomb threat. And the SPJ Airplay event received, I believe, multiple bomb threats. It's been reported. And that was a major Gamergate event. So 3 different Gamergate events have received bomb threats as well. We don't know who sent them. I wouldn't necessarily say it was anti-Gamergate. There were third-party trolls too, like Pterodax, who I've interviewed. I've also interviewed another third-party troll as well. And they would try to fuck with people on both sides because they thought that they were lol cows, or because they thought that everybody involved in this thing is a freaking idiot. And who's basically being autistic over video game journalism, and so they wanted to fuck with people on both sides, but they didn't align themselves with any camp.
They were
like
chaos
Pterodax.
Got you.
Yeah, he calls himself the Joker, and he has a picture of the Joker on his wall. When I interviewed him, you could see he's like, I keep this here to remind me of who I am, he says. And he actually bribed people to send death threats to Zoe Quinn, and he tweeted a picture of a gun at Brianna Wu. He also allegedly doxed, he claims on Ryzen IRC, I've got the chat logs of this, that he allegedly doxed Acid Man, a Gamergate supporter who ran the Gamergate HQ forum, though he later denied that claim.
A great person.
He did a bunch of other stuff too that's really bad. Like he would try to get YouTube people banned, so he would deliberately join live streams from people on both sides, pro Gamergate and anti Gamergate. It happened to Lord Nurgle. It happened to who's pro Gamergate. It happened to Helicopter Guy, who's anti Gamergate. It happened to me, I believe, at one point as well. I don't know if it was him specifically though. He says he's done it dozens of times, which I don't doubt at all, given how common that he tried to do this sort of thing, where he would join the call and deliberately yell the N-word as loud as possible, and or he'd say that him or other people. He says he didn't specifically say he was going to grill the resident, but he says other people in his group would say stuff like that, would join the call and threaten to murder the resident of the United States, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, and then he also tried to fuck with one of the Gamergate forums, and he also paid for advertisements, claiming that Gamergate supporters are, I don't remember what the exact thing he was. I don't know if he was calling us gay or if he was calling us nonces or something else, but he paid for ads to show up on the Gamergate forum. He spent money on this. He also allegedly was involved in a bunch of other stuff as well that was unrelated to Gamergate.
And this guy's a real piece of work. I do have a question for you. I know we're kind of wrapping up a little bit here on the interview portion, but I do have a caller who says that you've gotten a lot of things wrong. and he wants to talk to us about that and to come on and kind of challenge you a little bit. Is that something
Yeah,
you'd
sure.
be amenable to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's bring him on. Hello, you're live.
Oh shit! Sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't
I
realize.
got your DMs, man. I wasn't
Oh,
ignoring you. I was just streaming,
um,
right? But
problem. Hear me fine?
huh?
You can hear me fine?
Let me
Yeah, I
turn
hear
you
you.
up a little bit.
Okay. No, a couple of things. I was watching over on YouTube, so I'm not sure how close our timelines are. No, I passed first of all the Hogwarts Legacy thing. The Wired review. It is just an article. It's not on Metacritic. You can go check it if you like. It's not there. Um,
Okay.
it's
Let me. Hey, look, I might
it's
have gotten that part wrong.
Yeah, it is just. I mean, they do put up 1 out of 10, but it's not like a Metacritic review. For what it's worth, I do think it's pretty shit. It's got a lot of that, like, really reaching to try and complain about Rowling. Like, you can go on about her trans views if you like, but some of her, like, deeply racist, anti Semitic stuff I just think is very desperate. So, not favourable to it, but it is just an opinion piece. It's not like a review. And
Well,
I would
they do call it a review and give out a 1 out of 10, though, even if it's not a
yeah,
Metacritic.
but I just mean it's not in that like Metacritic kind of um games ranks or these like review aggregator things. It is just someone whinging a lot, but at the same time it's like I said, it doesn't fit into that. It's like making something like Christ-centric gaming and giving something a 1 because you're like it has too many satanic images. It's not actually
Well,
listed as like a proper review.
Christ Center Gamer, though, they actually, I think they do it a pretty interesting way. They have two different review scores. They do
But
one based on.
okay, I should say that I'm aware they exist. I have not looked at them in like over a decade.
Hey, no, thank you. I didn't know it wasn't on Metacritic, so thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, yeah, I guess I would go on with the whole Mumbot thing. I think the issue a lot of people have personally with Mumbot is that she basically made fake DMs. Like that's what. Like I don't really
Can
want to
you
get into a whole
hold on,
fight
really
over
quick,
who's worse and who's not.
Joe, 1 sec. Can you elaborate on that? Are you accusing
Yeah,
Monbot
yeah,
of faking DMs?
yeah. Yeah, she basically had a fight with like some anti-Gamergate guy, and yeah, she posted some fake like sexual DMs he sent her, asking her about like her feet and asking for feet pics. So that's kind of I would rather not get into a who
Are you talking about
sent
the?
on.
Well, I know she wrote an article about Robert 𝕵𝖎𝖙𝖏. Are you referring to that article?
I'm talking about a guy called Coops. I believe he had like a Paper Mario avatar, but no, that was a
9 volt?
quite. Yeah, I think his name's 9 volt at some point.
Okay.
Once again, this is
I
me.
do know 9 volt. He was in
Yeah.
that group. I don't know about this faking DMs thing. I don't that
Oh,
sounds like it was separate from the Zacatech thing, though, yes?
I
Because
don't
that was
know
never
about
brought
the
up
Zack.
in
The I
that.
don't know about a Zack Attack thing. I'm just saying, to my knowledge, that was what a lot of anger about Mumbot came from. So yeah, it was over fake DMs, which I think she you pretty much openly admitted when called out that yeah they were made up.
Yeah,
So that
I don't know about the 9 volt thing. I can't speak to what happened with her and him. I do know, except for that he was involved in the group, I believe. I can go back and look, but and she did also write at the same time. Supposedly, she did this in part um to sort of entice the anti-GGers to take the bait a little bit more. She did write the article about Robert 𝕵𝖎𝖏𝖏, though I don't know if anything in there was false, factually inaccurate in that article.
okay, yeah, no, I'm not sure what's up with the Zack Attack thing. This is drama. I'm trying to remember from when I was very young, so
Were you
I
involved in Gamergate, Joe?
very lightly, I would describe myself as someone who was mildly sympathetic at the start, and right now I would call myself mildly unsympathetic. But I was kind of one of these people who was mildly annoyed at like some of the online drama stuff, basically, like the Batman cover backlash. Sort of, you did get some of these low reviews where it seemed like it was just a reviewer taking a chance to like rant about stuff they found obnoxious to their politics. My issue, well, not really their politics, it would just be, I think there was a review in, I believe it was 𝕵𝖎𝖎 and the 100th Night, where like a quarter of the review is just complaining about a rape joke. Why I don't think this is such a huge issue is that most of the time that just crops up in games people generally don't care about, which to be fair is actually an issue in itself, but it's kind of like if you read a review of Dynasty Warriors, it will be like Dynasty Warriors 5 is the same as Dynasty Warriors 4, which is the same as 3, which was the same as 1. And you're like, 1 was a 1v1 fighting game. They completely changed genres with the second, versus a Halo review where someone will go in detail about the difference in how the guns feel.
Got you. Joe,
So-
if I may, did you have any other contentions with our boy Tachyon Blue here on some of the claims he's been making throughout this?
I feel that Overton window thing I generally disagree with when it comes to the idea of games reviews. Like I gave my example of like rape joke drama with like one review I found, but like I said, it doesn't really exist when it comes to big titles. For example, something like Grand Theft Auto 5, what you will get is people get angry at a review where there's like a bit where it complains about its treatment of women, and then the review itself is like a 9 out of 10. So,
yeah, I do. When I say gatekeep, I just want to qualify. Or the shifting of the Overton window, I don't just mean in reviews themselves. Though I do. Are you familiar with the Vice Waypoint controversy involving Final Fantasy 15, I believe it was, and when they basically the game's journalist, I don't think it was a review, it was a report. They said it was an article. They said that you would have think that that Square Enix would have seen the backlash to Cindy, this character who is sexy in the game and wears a kind of revealing outfit. The journalist said that you would have think that the Square Enix would have seen the backlash and changed it, since she is just one loose thread away from indignity. But nope. So as if like they expected the company to cave in to the mob, which I don't think that's a good way to do it.
I got a funny story involving Final Fantasy 15 because I was playing it. I got it for Christmas and I was playing it, and this is kind of embarrassing. Like my sister's boyfriend came in and like asked if like is this a like stripper or something regarding Cindy, and I made some cringy complaint about how the game was actually more appealing to women because it had like 5 attractive guys or something, which to be fair, I hear Final Fantasy 15 does have like one of those games which does have a bigger female fan base.
Okay.
But I do understand why a lot of people would just look at that design. It's one of those like cultural things where if you're into a lot of like that Japanese stuff, you probably don't see the big deal. But like if you're like into more Western stuff, you instantly go, why does this woman look like she's barely wearing anything?
You hit on something there that was kind of an aside, but I want to make it the main point, if I may, because this is my show, and well, I'm going to.
Okay.
That's what I'm interested in. You talk about making or expecting companies to cave into the mob, quote unquote. And I think that there is, not just in games, but in fandoms in general, that there is this push and pull between creator and consumer about what the consumer wants and what the creator is willing to give, right? And the question becomes, if you grow up loving a genre or an IP, right, of Star Trek or Doctor Who or whatever it may be, the Final Fantasy series, whatever it may be, how entitled are you to have input towards changes, even major changes, in a story or an IP or things like that? What do you think, Gang?
I think that if it's criticism, I think that's 100% fine. During Gamergate, I actually defended the guy involved with the TracerGate controversy, if you're familiar with that incident, because all he did was he posted on the forums saying, "Hey, look, I think this is sexist. I would like to see changes made to the game to take this pose from Tracer out." And I thought his critique was a little bit dumb, but you know what I said? I said, you know what? That's within the realm of discussion and ideas. I'm glad he has the opportunity to give his feedback. And yeah, I think that that's totally fine. Now, when you start creating like hashtags to try and pressure the developer, I think that that's different. Like when you see like the change the cover controversy, or when you try to get games banned from stores, like you saw with Grand Theft Auto 5 in Australia, where there was a petition with tens of thousands of signatures, and they actually succeeded in getting the game banned from Target in Australia. I think that that's when it
So
crosses the line.
we can say that banning is too far, and I think I would agree with you, right? But when it comes to putting pressure to get, like, if you want a change made, should you not put some pressure to get them to make it to change, right?
I think you should put pressure in the form of making a good argument for why this change is good. But I think ultimately it's the developer's artistic vision, and they should be able to pursue that artistic vision, especially if you're talking about artistic elements of the game and not something gameplay related necessarily.
Well, I would argue that the gameplay related plays
It can
into
be,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It
But
can be.
Joe, I'm curious your opinion as well.
Okay, shall I first address for like should something change depending on its fans? I personally would argue no. I'm someone who's generally favourable with ignoring the fans, but I do understand why you tend to get these backlashes with things. I think what often happens is you can get people who are very passionate about something. Like, let's say Star Wars. Star Wars is a great kind of just petri dish to experiment with, because you get something like that and people get really passionate. They read all the spin-off books, they like play the video games, and then a new trilogy comes along and all that gets wiped away and people get furious. You saw that with the prequel trilogy, if you're old enough to remember that, and you also sort of saw it's also with the new Disney stuff. And you tend to get this thing where it's confusing to debate quality or whether it's just fans being angry that they've kind of ignored all this stuff. So in cases like that, it's very confusing. Like, imagine if Twilight, they did a new Twilight movie and it was like this awesome action fantasy sort of thing aimed more to male audience, and suddenly tons of people loved it. But then the original Twilight fans would obviously be completely upset because it's not what they had any interest in when it came to Twilight. Like, I think that's the mess. When it comes to do people cave into pressure, I think they do. Like, does anyone remember Metal Gear Solid 2 and the whole drama surrounding that? Because that goes way back. And like, there's a ton of backlash because they basically hid the character you played as for 75% of the game, and tons of people just hated him. And you will find tons of jokes in the later Metal Gear games at his expense. Like, they make him, they did a prequel game, Metal Gear 3, where they used his model as kind of a gay lover for the main villain, who you kind of beat up and impersonate at one point. The trailer for Metal Gear 4 has like a bunch of jokes at his expense. There's like a ton of stuff, but I think where I think it's fine is they never went and like altered that original game to like change it. They just kind of left it as it is. So that's an interesting example of kind of like pleasing the fans a little bit, who were like upset at that guy, but not like completely giving in.
I don't know.
So that's why I'm never keen on this. Let's erase the canon and make a new thing for people. Like, stick with what you made, but it's fine if you want to try and pursue like a market which maybe didn't resonate as strongly as you'd hoped.
The problem here is I understand that like an artist can have his vision and do whatever he wants or she wants with their product, right? But if the next if Warhammer 40,000 changed its lore to be a happy utopian socialist paradise where everyone got along, I think that would be, I hesitate to say this, but this is how I feel. I think that would be immoral of the game of the lore creators to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like my Twilight example,
Yeah,
really.
kind of. But
Mm. Yeah, it is.
the people in my audience maybe who are more familiar with Warhammer 40K, I'm trying to use that.
Oh, I'm not.
Well,
Like,
I'm afraid.
immoral is a really interesting way of phrasing that.
yes, what you're doing, and that's why I hesitated to use the word, but I can't think of a better word. And let me explain. Let me elaborate a little bit. You have basically set up for years, right? A general idea of a setting. People have poured blood, sweat, and tears into their setting. They have become attached to the setting, right? They have spent like hard-earned money to buy products within the setting, etc. Um, to change it to that much, to that degree, seems like it would be kind of like a bait and switch, if you will, like a betrayal of everything about the fan base, right? And I don't think that while I don't know if I'd ever make it illegal to do. I think that if someone were to do that, it would be wrong. It would be a immoral act. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say immoral. I understand why you use that. I think it would be a disservice to the franchise, to the creators of the original work, and to the fans. I think that's probably safe to say. But immoral, is it well, let me ask this. Is it immoral for you to take a work and subvert it deliberately in a way that the fans are going to be very unhappy with, and maybe where even like the original creator of the work might be unhappy?
Depends.
I
I
I've
think
got a,
in certain circumstances, it absolutely, if you're trying to destroy a work, right, that people love, assuming that work is amoral or isn't a net negative on the world, right? So assuming like we're not talking about like Mein Kampf here, right? We're talking just a product, just an IP. It's not moral or immoral, it's just an IP. Something people like. But if you purposely buy that IP with the sole purpose of destroying that IP by subverting it, yeah, I think you've done something wrong.
Oh, can I jump in here and
Please.
say I just find that a bit of a goofy scenario. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but when I hear these things like betrayal and destroy when someone continues an IP, usually it's just kind of it. Like the worst examples, something like Fallout, Brotherhood of Steel. I don't know if you ever played that. I just think of it as like, okay, it wasn't very good, and it seemed like they kind of very aggressively missed some of their issues with it. I think, for example, let's say Warhammer, we got a live action Warhammer 40k movie, and I go in, I really like it, a lot of people really like it, but the fans hate it, and that's because I've just seen, oh, I kind of recognise this, I'll go see it. Um, I wouldn't like if is it immoral or not? It's a weird area because it is like a lot of things, just buying a powerful brand because you know it's easy to get people in. One example of subversion where I think you get the moral stuff, which is interesting, is there's a game series called like Tales of. It's like a JRPG
No,
series.
I've played it. Yeah.
Yeah, I it's one of these Japanese dramas. Like if you like to translate Japanese angry reviews, that can be a lot of fun. But yeah, one of the installments, um, it gets rid of an early party member really early in, and the fan base was furious. It led to the director of the majority of the games quitting the company. And one of the arguments, besides just the standard, you know, it's subversion, my expectations, was that people paid real money for these DLC costumes, and then this character is only in like the first 10% of the game and is then off. And it's an interesting one because people did arguably waste a bunch of money on like DLC tat and then have their
Yeah, I think
subversions thrown out.
yeah, that's extending it different, right? Like
It is. It's
I
just a
think that
weird
like
one.
we could all we, we maybe Tachyon Blue would disagree, but if there's an upcoming new Star Wars movie, right, and it's going to have and all the previews say it's going to feature this again if I don't know who I haven't seen the most recent Star Wars one um so I don't know who the main character is anymore, right?
Yeah, I stopped sort of
Yeah.
following a little while back.
But let's say it's her. Uh,
Mhm.
and it's
Well, I
advertised this is
think
a
it
Star Wars
is.
movie. It's gonna be her the thing. So they sell tickets, they sell merch, they sell all these things, and then when you get in the theater, it's and they're like, oh no, instead we're going to show you Gone with the Wind, remade. It's a musical now.
Do you mean literally they show Gone with the
Yeah,
Wind, or it's
literally,
a
it's gone.
musical?
It's like Troll. It's subverting. It's showing
Yeah,
that people buy a
I
ticket
would
to anything,
argue.
right? Type
See,
of thing.
I thought you were leading me up to an example like Metal Gear 2, where they present one main
Nope.
character and then it's another. But no, I'd argue at that point they are just wasting your money. Like, that is flat out not fair. That's not a story twist. That's
Well,
just
it's
selling
misleading
you.
advertising.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it's misleading advertising.
When there's the controversy with Mass Effect 3, which have you played that?
I have. I liked
I
Mass
have
Effect
also.
3.
Yep, I remember that drama.
I didn't play Andromeda, but I did play Mass Effect 3.
Yeah, I played 1 through 3, no Andromeda.
The
And I didn't actually
ending.
finish 3,
I remember when
but
it came out. The big controversy at the time was the endings, right?
my big response to that was, well, 2's ending was also awful, so I wasn't surprised.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Well, do you think it's immoral though? Because
No.
I don't know if I would say it is either. But on Wick, you talked about morality. Because they boiled down the ending to 3 basically identical endings after making it seem like all of your choices were going to matter to some extent. Do you think that was immoral for the developers, for the publisher, I guess, to do? Because technically,
No.
I think developers came out did some of the developers say that they didn't want that vision either? That they were rushed for time?
I'm not sure what
I'm
the
not sure.
developers were saying, right? But just the idea of them doing it poorly is a little different than what I'm talking about when I'm saying immoral, right? I
I
don't think
think
they did it on purpose. Does that make sense?
my issue here is this type of talk with Mass Effect 3, where they talk about how much your choices will affect the ending and how many variants there will be, is the same lie basically that every PR guy says about every RPG. Like, they said it about the previous Mass Effects, they said it about Fallout 3, they said it about Jade Empire. Like, you keep having there's tons of different possibilities, and then it turns out there's like 2 to 3 endings, and you get some mild variants depending on like what you did throughout various side bits. So I agree it's disappointing, but it's also an example of just some PR spin that every kind of developer who does these big RPG adventures tends to do. So it's sort of like, okay, it's a lie, but also I feel like people should have seen through it if
Look,
they've
yeah,
played other
it's not
games.
it's just PR speak. I think it's fundamentally different than what I'm talking about when I say like when most people say that it's it's a destruction of their IP, they're full of shit, right? Most people don't know what they're talking about. Um, I'm talking about like a substantive and like overwhelming, impossible to say otherwise subversion, if you want to call it, or just throwing out literally everything and making an entirely new thing, but packaging it with the same packaging as before. Does that make sense?
I mean, it's an interesting because I was disappointed with the direction of the new Yakuza games, which have gone from like action games to turn-based RPGs. But once again, it's like, oh, just get over it. Like, I don't like him as much
Yeah,
as I
but that's
used to.
not
But
that's a genre change. It's not a
yeah, fair point.
and that it's a
But yeah,
gameplay
I
change.
get what
But
you
the
mean
Yakuza games
by
are
a
still about
bait.
Yakuza, correct?
Well, actually, because there isn't much in the way of real Yakuza in Japan anymore, they've become increasingly not about the Yakuza. They've dropped the title. They're now no longer calling them Yakuza. So,
Okay.
weird example. But
Well,
no,
either
it's
way.
yeah, I kind of just feel like there isn't really that much in the way of good examples of this. Like, the best examples I think are less like plot related and more just when something comes up and is just buggy and unfinished.
Okay.
Because in that case there is a bit more of an argument because you have all this PR spin and like
Joe?
reviews can't come out, etc.
Joe, thanks for calling in. We're gonna let you go, and I'm gonna let Tachyon
Okay.
give his closing thoughts
Okay,
and stuff.
sure, no problem.
See you later,
Thanks
Joe.
for having me.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks for coming on, Joe. It was good talking to you.
Okay. Sorry that went different than I expected, but we got through it. I guess, yeah. If you want people to take away one thing from your books and your works and your writings on Gamergate, give us your closing spiel. Sell us on the book. Why should people buy it? Why should people read it? Why should people care? Go ahead.
I guess I'd say that Gamergate was a heck of a lot more complicated than a lot of people will tell you, and that if all you know about Gamergate was that it was a harassment campaign against women, I do include voices in my book who think that's the case, but I don't think that that is an accurate summation of what happened during Gamergate. I think it was a lot more nuanced than that. I think that a lot of the people involved, there were some bad people involved too, like Ethan Ralph, but the vast majority of the people involved weren't in it because of misogyny or harassment or trying to get Trump elected or anything like that. I think that it's a community that fortunately was unfairly demonized by much of the games press and then later the mainstream media. Um, and not many people really looked into what actually happened or talked to the people involved in the actual movement. And if you want to find out what really happened, you could buy my book, or I won't be that conceited. I will direct you, I guess, to a couple other places too. 𝕵𝖔𝖎𝖙 𝖍𝖔𝖚's work on Gamergate. He did a very good study on Gamergate. It's difficult to find now because it was on Game Politics originally. Part of it was the full methodology. If you ask him, he'll give it to you. There's also an Airplay documentary that came out recently. It's a documentary about the Airplay event, which was a Gamergate event, but it also touches upon other aspects of Gamergate too. And also Michael Koretsky's Airplay, the first panel at least, was very good. So you can check that out. It's available on YouTube, or you can buy my first book, or eventually at some point, hopefully
What's your first
next
book
year.
called?
Gamergate: First Battle of the Culture War by Kevin McDonald. It's available on Amazon, on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited for free, I believe, or whatever they call Kindle Unlimited now. And it's I think $10 paperback.
Okay. Thank you for coming on and talking to me about this. I know I'm not the most educated on Gamergate, but I think that provides a good kind of showcase to my audience about what a normie might think when they're talking about Gamergate or they hear about Gamergate. So I appreciate you coming and giving your side of things and kind of telling me what you think. For now, though, we're going to let you go. See you later, buddy.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I'm on Stardust Show tomorrow.
Oh, check him out, gang. Stardust tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. But what you're really going to watch, gang, is my show tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow, we are going to have a wide variety of guests. We're going to have 𝕻𝖎. We're going to have Pisco. We're going to have Lactoid. We're going to have Johnny Scarlet. We're going to have Quibbles Over Coffee. We're going to have, there was one more, a 𝕻𝖎. We're going to be talking about the recent Colorado Supreme Court ruling. There was a ruling, I think, maybe not today, maybe it was yesterday, very recently, Michigan's state Supreme Court had a ruling on a similar case, and their ruling found the opposite of what Colorado's state Supreme Court did. So we're talking specifically about Trump being on the ballot in these states because of his alleged insurrection. Again, states are ruling in on this. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who should we listen to? Tomorrow we're going to talk about it. We have at least 2 lawyers on tomorrow. It should be fun. And we have some normies on too to give the normie perspective on these things. So tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Gang, thank you for all the subs, donations, bits. All of that helps. If you like the content, if you like the channel, hit that follow button, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Give some subs, throw some bits. All these things are great, and they really help the channel. So that's tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed today. For now, we're going to see you later. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.